is the president and Madam Secretary. CNN yesterday pushed an app that lets you track where ICE agents are. Tom Homan saying that perhaps he eventually prosecuted that. Spread to law enforcement. Your response.
Yeah, we're working with the Department of Justice to see if we can prosecute back to that, because what they're doing is actively encouraging people to avoid law enforcement activities, operations, and we're going to actually go after them across if you can, the partnership of CAM if we can, because what they're doing we believe is illegal.
And they may be prosecuted also for having given false reports on these attacks in Iran. You give it to me false reports.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, that was Donald Trump and Kristi Noem being asked about the prospect of prosecuting CNN for two different things. One is CNN reported on the existence of an app that allows people to track ICE, and Donald Trump also interjected that while the DOJ may be going after them for that, there's also the prospect that CNN can be prosecuted for what Donald Trump says is false reports on the attack on Iran. So first and foremost, the legality of what Donald Trump is saying, would the Department of Justice be able to go after CNN, for example, for reporting on the existence of an app, or also reporting on intel assessments that say that Iran's nuclear capabilities were not obliterated?
So CNN has not broken the law. So in that sense, the answer is no. On the other hand, Donald Trump controls the Department of Justice. I mean, like right. Anyone watching that clip, there is no separation between Donald Trump, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice, or as Kristi Noem refers to the DOJ as Pam.
Pam.
Right? Like she wants a partnership with Pam. And that just gives you some sense of the tenor of how they view this, which is just one big team. There is no independent Department of Justice. There is no Department of Justice that tells the president, no, Mr. President, we do not in this country go after or prosecute media organizations for saying and printing things we do not like. We do not prosecute media organizations for noting the existence of apps that are widely available on cell phones. That is not how we work in the United States. It is not part of our ethos. It is not part of what is acceptable, and it is not something the law or the Constitution permit. That is what you would expect the Department of Justice to say if they got this request. You'd also expect the Department of Justice to complain bitterly that they are being interfered with by a White House as to who to go after at all. And so that's what you would expect. But I suspect that, Pam, in between, going to the fridge in the Oval Office as she yucks it up with Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, will say, sure, what do you want me to go after him for? Wouldn't it be great if we also did this, right? Like this is the problem when you have an authoritarian as the president who has appointed his lackeys, his cronies, his supplicants to these positions of high power. And when you've had Republicans in the U.S. Senate confirm each and every one of them. I played this game earlier, Brian, not to take us off topic, but I'll play it with you. So is it Pam Bondi? Is it Pete Hegseth? Is it Kristi Noem? Like, who is the most ridiculous of the people that we now that Donald Trump has appointed that Republicans have confirmed?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that given the extensive conversations we've had on this show, the fact that our law enforcement agencies, from starting from a party that lost its collective mind when Bill Clinton met Loretta Lynch on the tarmac and spoke with her one time, and that was enough to envelop right-wing coverage for God knows how long, to now.
At which point, by the way, he was the former president.
and now you've got Pam, to your exact point, sitting in the kitchen in the residence, just yucking it up and deciding how they're gonna wield the Department of Justice against political enemies for cases that have no basis in the law whatsoever. But because Donald Trump found an attorney general who, by the way, decided not to prosecute Trump University just around the time Trump gave a $25,000 donation to her attorney general campaign, well, things are a little bit different now. Which I guess raises the question, notwithstanding what the courts are going to do, and we can talk about that in a moment, whether the courts are able to hold against frivolous lawsuits like this. But what is the point, knowing that these lawsuits are very likely to fail, knowing that there's no basis in the law for them, knowing that they're egregiously unconstitutional? What is the point then for Donald Trump to bring them forward? What's he expecting to get out of this?
Yeah, so he's going to get three things. Number one, he's going to get a media that is going to become more compliant rather than less. And before all the legacy media people say, no, it's going to get our back up and we're going to be even tougher. Bullshit.
Yeah.
They kicked the AP out of the pool and you all caved. I mean, you practically threw a party for the guy with the White House Correspondents' Event. And then he stiffed you and didn't show up at your party. The fact is some part of the legacy media will just back away and be less critical. So that's number one. Number two, they will show that he's tough. He will say, look how tough I am. I'm going after them and I'm causing them all this heartburn and everybody needs to know I'm in charge and I'm all powerful. And number three, let's not forget, legacy media is trying to find ways to slip checks under Trump's door. If there's a way to put an extra $15 million in the kitty, don't put it beyond legacy media to do it. I mean,
totally. He's almost giving them a vehicle. He's saying, hey, now we've got this lawsuit. If you had intended on giving me some cash, this might be a good vehicle for you to do so.
Yeah, he's sitting there thinking, wait a second, I got Disney, I got them, I got their check. I got Washington Post. Bezos, he flew his whole way over to my. Oh,
don't forget the $40 million for the Melania documentary that I'm sure tens of people enjoyed.
Yeah, we got the Melania documentary. CBS, they're on the precipice. They're stroking their check.
Yep.
Paramount's going to get so. It may be that he's doing CNN a favor. It may be that they're Zaslav and those guys are sitting there thinking, hey, we need our invitation to cut you some money, cut you a check. And so, we say this only half facetiously. So don't put it beyond the legacy media to just cave and settle on ridiculous terms.
Right. Now let's talk about the judicial aspect of this. Is there a world in which you've got the Department of Justice, which if we're looking at this presumption of regularity, which we've spoken about quite a bit, which is that this long-standing idea that the DOJ is only going to bring cases that are legitimate and well-founded and prosecutable, convictable, then is there a world in which judges look at this case, as ridiculous as it may be, to objective observers and say, you know what, if the DOJ is bringing it and we offer them all of this deference because it's the Department of Justice, then maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, this is always what I worry about with these criminal investigations and DOJ investigations, is that it is one thing to say, which was your first question, is this legal? Like, can he do this? And it depends what part of it you mean. The system is set up to allow DOJ to conduct a very intrusive investigation with very little court oversight and a whole lot of deference. And sure, at the end of the day, a jury may acquit. A judge might even throw the charges out. But that is at the end of a very long day. I mean, that is at the end of a very long process of a lot of heartburn and a lot of agita and a lot of...
It's probably finances too, a lot of money it costs to do this stuff.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
And along the way, the Department of Justice can put a lot of pressure on the institutions and the individuals and try to make a whole lot of nothing into something. And that is the great risk. When Donald Trump was in office the first time, he convinced Bill Barr, his then Attorney General, to appoint John Durham to look into the 2016 election, and in particular the fact that the FBI and the intelligence community took seriously the threat that Russia played in that election. And at the end of the day, there were acquittals. In the end of the day, the Durham investigation was largely discredited. But that didn't mean that two people didn't have to stand trial and go through that financial cost, that pain and anguish. It didn't mean a whole lot of witnesses, myself included, didn't wind up having to spend a whole lot of time and money dealing with that investigation. So there can be a lot of damage done, even if you ask that first question, is it legal? And the answer is, well, no one's going to go to jail for it. No one's going to get convicted of it. So there's a lot of damage they can do.
Is there a way to make yourself whole after the DOJ has kind of engaged in what may very well be retaliatory prosecution or weaponized, some weaponized government against you? Because this is going to take up your time. It's going to take up your resources. It's going to take up your money. And if we know that it's not well founded, normally if this was a case that's a civil case, for example, you can recoup fees. You can countersue for damages. Is there a way to make yourself whole if a weaponized federal government goes on the attack against you?
No, look, I mean, I'll just use myself as an example. Like, I was never, I wasn't prosecuted, I wasn't indicted, but, there's no question that Donald Trump and his Department of Justice spent a fair amount of money trying to see what they could find out about me.
Yeah.
And, to this day, I get an enormous amount of hate and misinformation spread about me on the right. Articles that are written about me from the far right wing, will refer to me as a Russian hoaxer because I suppose I said that Russia actually did try to interfere in the 2016 election.
Yeah.
And you never get back the time, the energy, the anguish, the money that goes into that because, like I said, I wasn't charged. Thankfully, I don't think I was ever in serious jeopardy of being charged. But you're still going through it. And so there's no way to make up for that. And I'm a lawyer, I'm someone who's pretty high profile. I'm someone who is willing to stand up and speak publicly about these things. Most people who are in the position I was in, they just want to hide from it. They just don't want to be, they don't want to be targeted. They don't want to become an object of hate and scorn from the right wing. At one point, last election cycle, some group paid to have mobile billboards right around my building where I work, and spread lies about me. They took out ads in the media to lie about me. Most people don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
And so, sure, like CNN, big corporation, they'll be fine. But the individuals who get caught up in it, it sucks for them.
Right, I understand. Which, by the way, I would just say, judge you by your enemies, and if these are the people that you're pissing off, then you're doing something right. Let's finish off with this. In terms of, we've had a lot of these Democracy Watch episodes. You've published a lot of posts on Democracy Docket talking about the ways in which this DOJ has engaged in different prosecutions, largely unlawful. You cited in Democracy Docket a Stanford study that shows the DOJ is losing 96% of cases, but they're still engaging in it. It still takes up their resources. Does there come a point where, for example, in this case that we're talking about right now, if they do engage in litigation to sue CNN, this is going to take up resources for the DOJ? And yes, it will be largely doomed, at least legally speaking. And will there come a point where they run out of attorneys and prosecutors who are willing to actually litigate these doomed cases in the first place? I mean, does there come a point where you're spread so thin that you can't actually accomplish any of what you're setting out to accomplish? There's not an endless supply of DOJ prosecutors, and yet we hear about new cases every single day.
Look, I think that they very much experienced a shortage. Donald Trump came into office. They immediately engaged in the firing of a whole lot of people in the executive branch that it turns out they realized they needed. And some of those were seasoned lawyers at the Department of Justice, both criminal and civil. Then, of course, they ran out a whole bunch of other very qualified lawyers because those lawyers dared to have ethics and tell the truth. And some of them resigned and some of them were fired. So I think the Department of Justice would say they are already short-staffed, and I would say that is entirely of their own making. They are the ones who are doing it. My fear is that right now they are actually rebuilding, and they are rebuilding with a caliber of lawyer that may not be technically very good, may not be the most talented lawyer, but is just a true believer from start to finish.
Right.
And we read about those folks every day. People, that their friends are oftentimes like, oh my God, I had no idea. Right.
Yeah.
But people who are willing to defend and advocate positions that are just an anathema to democracy and principles of rule of law. And so my fear is that they will make up that gap by hiring to make sure that Trump has 100% loyalists in the Department of Justice on his every whim.
Well, all of that underscores the importance of elevating voices like yours to counteract all of the bad lawyering that we're seeing from the other side. So one small step that everybody who's watching right now can take to support Mark and his team is to subscribe to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, just one button. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, but it helps elevate his voice and the voice of his team. And these are the people that we need to elevate to the top of the ecosystem here. So I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.